Hello class, welcome to today's segment, which will be an introduction to our speaking module. So let us get right into it. The IELTS speaking test gauges a candidate's ability to communicate in English through speech. So guys, the speaking test is basically testing your ability to communicate to the other person in English by talking. So, are you able to ensure that the other person understands what you're talking about? Like you can talk to them and they understand what you're trying to communicate to them. So that's basically what the IELTS speaking test is all about, or what it gauges. Okay. This speaking test is actually most candidates' stronghold. Most candidates find the IELTS speaking test to be easier compared to the other IELTS tests. So guys, if there's a section of IELTS you really need to ace, is speaking test. You can choose it to be a stronghold, and our aim in the speaking IELTS test is a band 8 and above. Yeah, and you can also get band 8.5. I've seen students get a band 9, so you can. Okay. So, as we had said earlier, the speaking test is undertaken on a different timeline compared to the listening, reading, and writing tests, which are usually taken at the same time. So the speaking test can either be taken on the same day as listening, reading, and writing, but on a different timeline. For example, if you did your the first 3 tests in the morning, then probably your speaking test can be carried out in the afternoon. Alternatively, it can also be carried out on a completely different day. For example, you do listening, reading, and writing today, and listening you do and speaking you do it tomorrow, or you could have done it yesterday. So you do it at a completely different timeline. So this also gives you time to focus on the test alone. Like you can really focus on the speaking test because you are not doing it alongside the other tests. Okay. This test lasts about 15 to 20 minutes and is carried out either face to face or through video call. Face to face meaning that an examiner is seated across the table from you. So they are asking you questions while you answer them across the table. Like you are seated here, the examiner is seated across the table, and the examiner is asking you questions while you answer them. Video call is whereby you are on video call and the examiner is asking you questions on the other side of the screen while you're answering them. But it's very rare for the speaking test to be on video call. This was mostly common during the corona period, but right now, since the COVID restrictions are down, then most probably your test is going to be face to face. Okay. During your speaking test, ensure that you've carried your ID card, your pen, and a mask, like the mask that we wear due to corona. So please guys, sometimes you might find out that you've forgotten your identification card. This is the card that you use to book your IELTS exam. You might forget it because remember, the speaking test is done on a different timeline. For example, yesterday during your listening and reading and writing test, you carried your ID. Today maybe you can forget. So please ensure when you go for your speaking test, you've carried your identification card, you've also carried your pen, and you've carried your mask. Please take note of that. The 3 minutes that you enter your exam room, you are required to say your name, give an introduction, and ID confirmation. So guys, if you're doing the face-to-face speaking test, so it's done in a room whereby it's only you and the examiner seated across the table. And then if you're doing UKVI, there is a live recording of your tests. So there is a camera recording you too. The examiner can either be male or female. Okay, so once you enter the room, the first thing the examiner does is the examiner introduces himself or herself. They say their name and they also say that they are going to examine you. Yes, they just say, for example, my name is Laura Mudeu and I will be your speaking test examiner. Something across those lines. And then after that, the examiner asks you for your identification card. So you give them, if it's your national ID, if it's your passport, they confirm that you are truly Laura Mudeu or XYZ. And then after that, this part is not part of the test. The examiner introducing themselves, asking you identification card, that is not part of the exam. It's just formality, so don't be tensed up. So after that, when the exam officially begins, the examiner is going to tell you, so our test has begun, and then they're going to begin asking you questions. Okay, so this lasts for about 3 to 5 minutes maximum. So please take this time to familiarize with the examiner and your environment. Like, you just take this time to relax, sit down well, breathe in, breathe out before the exam begins. Okay. Remember, it is not your knowledge or information being tested, it's just your natural English conversation. Remember guys, as I said, IELTS does not test your knowledge, as in how smart you are, how knowledgeable you are in certain things. No, they are just testing your ability to communicate what you know. So remember guys, you do not have to be Albert Einstein to ace your speaking test. They're just testing your ability to communicate. Even if they ask you, okay, this is just an example, who's the president of maybe Mozambique? And you don't know the president of Mozambique. They're not testing your knowledge of the president of Mozambique. They're testing your knowledge to be able to communicate if you know or you don't know. For example, if you know, you'll just say the president of Mozambique is XYZ, and I've heard that he's a really good president and he's leading his country well. But if you don't know, you just say, at the moment I'm not really aware who's the president of Mozambique, but once I step out of this room, then I'll go Google it and I'll have that knowledge. So basically, if you give a wrong answer or if you don't know the answer in a speaking test, it doesn't mean that you failed. You only fail when you do not communicate. So you can communicate saying the right answer, the wrong answer. You can communicate by saying you do not know the answer. You get what I mean? Okay. So they're just testing your ability to communicate, not your knowledge. It's not like an exam whereby the examiner is testing your knowledge. For example, a mathematics test, an English test, maybe physics class. That is not what they are testing. They're just testing your ability to communicate. So what is being tested is comprehension of what you've been asked, your fluency, and your grammar. So they'll be testing if your answer has good grammar, if your answer has fluency, and if your answer is in line with what they've asked you. So for example, they've asked you who's the president of Mozambique. Then, for you to show that you've understood what they've asked you, you will say something in line with Mozambique and in line with what they've asked you. You cannot be asked who's the president of Mozambique and then you come on and start talking about deforestation is not very good in Mozambique, or something like Africa is a Africa is a large country. So Africa consists of 54 states. Like the examiner will be like, what are you talking about? This is not in line with what I've asked you. So your answer will be gauged in terms of its fluency, your comprehension of the question, and your grammar. So what is the way you're communicating fluent? Is the way you're communicating grammatically correct? Have you understood me? Okay. Practice, practice, practice is everything. Do not underestimate this section because nervousness can get the best of you. Guys, as I've said and I've repeated a million times so far, practice is everything in IELTS. The more you practice, the better you become. So the more you, like they say, the more you practice, the luckier you become. So practice makes you lucky. So practice, practice, practice. Practice each part of IELTS. Before the exam, practice either with a friend, with a colleague. And during your practice, ensure that you practice just exactly the way the exam is going to be. If you're practicing with a friend, let the friend sit down. You sit on the other side of a table and let the friend be serious and take it like a real exam. Every practice test you do should be taken with the same seriousness as the actual examination. So practice is everything. And for speaking, practice each section of the speaking test. We are going to discuss the sections in the speaking test. So practice questions that you may encounter in each section of the speaking test. So please, 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 practice is everything. Okay. Record yourself during your self-practice. Guys, sometimes maybe your friend is busy, your colleague is busy, or you just basically want to practice when nobody is there. So what you can do in this instant is record yourself. Guys, when you speak, you usually feel like you're really speaking well, but once you listen to your recording, oh my goodness, you'll find that there's some places you kept quiet for a very long time. So when you're doing self-assessment, please record yourself. And even if you have colleagues examining you, also do some practice tests while recording yourself. This is because you can listen to that recording slowly by slowly and note your mistakes and how to improve them on your next practice tests. Okay. In part 1 and part. Answer you give in one question marries with the next question, especially in part 1 and part 3. That is why the truth is kind of important. I know we've not yet discussed the parts of the speaking IELTS test, but I felt it's important to emphasize this. Guys, so as I said, IELTS is not testing your knowledge. So please ensure that you kind of are telling the truth, because what the examiner does, the examiner mostly does not have pre-thought out questions. They do have questions, but the flow of the questions they're going to ask you will be in line with the answers you give. So it's important to kind of say the truth. This is because you can always defend the truth, or you can always have your answer at the top of your head if you're saying the truth. I don't know if you get what I mean. For example, if you're telling a lie, if I ask you the next question, it's going to take you a longer time to figure out the answer of that question because you are lying. But if you're saying the truth, then probably when I ask you the next question in line with the previous question, then you'll have an answer. You understand what I'm saying? Because let me give you an example. For example, the examiner has asked you, so where do you live, for example? Or something like, do you live in a rural or urban town? That is the examiner's question. You say that I live in Athi River, which is an urban town, for example. And maybe Athi River is not an urban town. Maybe Athi River is a rural town. This is just but an example. So the examiner will tell you the next question, because the examiner is asking you questions in line with your answer. So see, your answer you gave that you live in an urban town. So the next question your examiner is going to ask you is, this is just but an example, how do you feel the government can improve the infrastructure in your town to ensure that roads are accessible in each doorstep? This is just an example. But for example, Athi River is not an urban town. Athi River is a rural town. There is literally no infrastructure. You see, it will take me some amount of time to try to figure out, so how will the government improve that? Or maybe they ask you, what is the nearest shopping center in Athi River and what is amazing about that shopping center? Maybe in Athi River there's no shopping center. You see, I'll start wondering, now which shopping center will I talk about? Oh, what am I going to say is amazing about this shopping center that doesn't actually even exist? You get what I mean? So it will take you a long time to communicate. I know the examiner is not testing your knowledge, but they are testing your ability to communicate. But once you lie, you will take a long time before you're able to communicate to the examiner, because you're gathering your thoughts. And the examiner will assume, the examiner does not know you're lying, but they'll assume you do not know how to communicate your answers. You take very long to think. That will be the assumption. But this is something that would have been easily avoided if you were saying the truth. Because if you said you were living in a rural town, the examiner would have asked you a question in line with your rural town. That's just but an example. Okay. So try to say the truth. The examiner will not know if it's the truth or false, but I've come to realize that false answers leads more problems. Okay. Note your stronghold among the 3 sections in the IELTS speaking test and ensure that you have really performed well in that stronghold. Guys, as I said, the IELTS speaking test consists of 3 sections. So ensure that you figure out which section is your stronghold, and ensure that you have performed really well in that stronghold. As I said, IELTS is all about balancing out your scores. So even in each module, you can ensure that you've aced one section. I'm not saying that you fail maybe the other sections. I'm just saying identify your stronghold and ensure in that stronghold you perform the best, so that it can boost these other two parts. Or maybe if all of the 3 parts are your strongholds, well and good. If you identify your weak points, also ensure that you practice your weak points more, so that it does not drag your overall score. So identify your stronghold, also identify your weak hold. Okay. Relax, be confident, be calm. It's just an exam. Panic can bring a band 8 or band 9 candidate to a solid band 6. Guys, as I said, the examiner is testing your ability to communicate in English. So please relax. It's just an exam. It's just the way you speak to any other person. Please do not panic, because once you panic, most probably you will not be able to gather your thoughts at a good speed, and probably you will be hesitating while speaking. So treat the examiner like your friend or your colleague. Just assume you're talking to your colleague or your friend. That way you will not panic. Guys, once you panic, your score will probably just go down because you will be confused. You will not understand the questions because you are already panicked. So just relax, be confident, and confidence is everything. So this will come along once you do your practice tests. Once you practice, you will just find that the answers are the questions are very simple, and the answers are even simpler. So no need to panic, guys. No need to panic. Okay. Smile. Do not use a robotic voice. Not too slow, not too fast. Guys, as I said, it's just an examination. Please use your normal voice. Like, don't be too serious as if you're talking to the CEO, I don't know, Jeff Bezos. I recently watched an interview of Jeff Bezos, and he also smiles. He does not talk in a robotic voice. So guys, treat the examiner the same way you treat your colleague, the same way you talk to your friend or your teacher. Okay, it should be official, but do not like go into a panic mode. You know what I mean? Like you're talking like, oh my God, I don't believe that. Like, you're not talking the way you'd talk normally. Remember, they're just gauging your ability to communicate. And normally, you wouldn't communicate to a colleague in a robotic voice or too fast or too slow. Just communicate the way you'd communicate to any other person. They're just gauging if you're able to make the other person understand what you're saying. Okay, guys, as we wind up the introduction part, I'd want to say that the speaking test is one of the easier modules for most students. So please, yeah, everything's going to be all right. And our band score aim is band 8, and I'm pretty sure all of us will be able to achieve that. Okay, guys, we've come to the end of this segment. See you in our next class. Bye.